Welcome to SDSPA's 2023 podcast season. I'm your host, Laura Kaler. South Dakota Specialty Producers Association is made up of growers, consumers, and others interested in producing, marketing, and supporting South Dakota's specialty crops, meats, and locally made products. This podcast is made possible through a specialty crop block grant SDSPA received through the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. This season, our podcast theme is Grown Here, how South Dakota producers are growing their specialty crops. Today, we're going to be looking at root crops like carrots, garlic, and potatoes, which you will be tending to throughout the season, but the most important growth is going to be happening out of sight and under the soil. Today, Dirk Oudman of Blue Sky Vegetable Co. and Darin Waldner of Waldner Farms are going to be sharing their processes to assure a healthy harvest of these root crops. Welcome, Dirk and Darin. Thank you both for joining us today. To get started, can you tell us all about your farms and which crops you're growing there?
So my name is Dirk Oudman. My wife and I farm at Blue Sky Vegetable Company in Worthing, South Dakota, just south of Sioux Falls. We grow, this year we'll be at about 4 acres of produce, doing a 100-member CSA as well as some farmers market. Root crop-wise, we tell everyone we grow everything. I think we have 42 varieties of crops going in this year, and then the different varieties of those crops. Roots, we do a heavy emphasis on beets and carrots, some turnips, some radishes, potatoes.
Well, and my name's Darin Waldner. I with Waldner Farms out of Webster, South Dakota. Farm with my wife and a few of my other family members, my mom, and I got a couple little kids that are coming up the worker to help with the work, I guess. We've got probably about 10 acres that we put into production and rotate around. Do a lot of pumpkins, potatoes, sweet corn. We do have a high tunnel. There's a lot of other stuff that we do. Quite the variety, and I've been known to try just about growing anything, and it seems like you master one and you move on to the next one, and it throws you another curveball. The root crop stuff we do. Probably my favorite is the garlic. We grow a lot of garlic, and that is in the ground growing already. There's potatoes, do a few carrots, some beets. So there's plenty of root crops to be found in our garden, along with all the other fun stuff, the pumpkins and the sweet corn. So
awesome. What do you guys think is the most challenging thing about root crops when compared to vegetables that are growing above the ground, like your peppers and tomatoes?
Probably for us, weed control and germination are the biggest challenges with root crops. Generally, a lot of our root crops are pretty slow to emerge, especially the beets and carrots, and trying to keep them weed-free. Most of the things that grow above ground, we end up doing as transplants, not as direct seed. And so you're able to get that couple of week jump on the weeds, and that allows for a lot easier cultivation technique. So root crops, really the big challenge we see is making sure that we're putting them into a really clean seed bed so that they have plenty of time to come up and mature. Most root crop plants are not the most vigorous or hardy. Obviously, your turnips and your radishes are going to be your more vigorous as far as how fast they come up and how aggressively they'll take cultivation. But, carrots are pretty spindly for quite a while. So that's always our challenge, is making sure we can keep things as clean as possible when those seeds are young, when they're just coming up, so that, once they've started to canopy over the bed, that we don't have to come back and do a lot of hand weeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. The germination thing has been kind of really tough for us. We've got, I'm going to say, a little bit heavier soils. So it seems like they'll, just when you think you've got it and you've kept everything moist, the germination just doesn't quite happen. And so that's a tough one for us, especially with the carrots and the radishes and stuff. The beets always seem to find a way to grow up for us. They pop pretty easy, and getting that initial blast of weeds knocked down is critical, because it seems like if you can get that first shot of weeds taken care of, usually the rest of them are pretty easy to stay on top of. With the potatoes and stuff, that's a whole nother animal. The carrots, like you said, are spindly, and the potatoes, they grow fast, and they're kind of, they're tough you can be tough on them, and while you're cultivating a little bit, and they seem to tolerate it pretty well. Different pieces of equipment for each one of them. We've tried to implement different things. And
so starting with the soil, what type of soil are you looking for with your root crops, and what do you do to prepare your bed? Dirk, you said it's got to be a pretty clean bed for the direct seeding.
Yeah. So for us, we don't necessarily, our farm is pretty uniform as far as soil types. It's all kind of a mostly silt loam with a little bit of clay mixed in. So like Darin said, sometimes a little on the heavier side, but there's not a lot of variation. So it's not like there are certain fields we're looking to put roots into. We last year invested in a spader, which is a deep tillage machine. So we go through with that for our first pass. That'll kind of gently turn and loosen the soil about 12 to 14 inches down. And so that lets us avoid having to go through with a chisel plow or a mold board or anything. Particularly for carrots, having that really deep root zone is important for them to grow straight. If you got compaction 6 inches down, the carrots will hit that layer of compaction, and they'll start to branch out sideways, or they'll get twisted. And they still taste fine, but they don't look quite as pretty on the stand or in people's boxes.
That makes sense. People want beautiful looking carrot.
They do, right? I mean, we all grew up with Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny, so we all know what a carrot's supposed to look like.
Yep.
So we'll hit the soil with a spader first. Then we'll come back. We do all our growing on raised beds for moisture management. I know that seems strange in South Dakota, where keeping moisture on the soil is such a challenge. But in the spring, we find that with the heavy rains we've been getting, it's easier to have a raised bed and know we'll get the drainage, so that we can make sure at least that bed top is dry, both for direct seeding and then also for that early cultivation pass. So we'll come through after the spader with the same machine that we lay plastic mulch with, and we'll just form up bare ground raised beds with that. So all our beds are going to be a uniform size. After we've formed up a bed, as long as the soil surface looks about how we want it to as far as aggregation, we'll come back through. Hopefully we'll get some spring rain or some irrigation on that bed. We'll get the first flush of weeds out. We'll hit it with a basket weeder underneath the cultivating tractor to clear out that first flush of weeds, and then we'll come in and plant right after that.
Is it much different on your farm, Darin?
Actually, the raised bed thing, we started doing that, and part of the reason we did it is not so much the moisture. We're trying to control moisture, working with the moisture. That was a happy thing we found out afterwards. It worked nice because like you said, that rain would run off those beds and they wouldn't be so saturated. And especially as those, the carrots and the small seed is so hard to manage in those beds. You're not getting the wash, and they're not sitting in that moisture and rotting. They're germinating and running instead. But yeah, we do the same. We do a very similar practice, actually. We use our bed shaper is a separate tool, and we just hook onto our bed shaper, and we raise the bed, shape it, probably put a 3-inch raise on it, and work with it that way. So we usually shape it and plant, sometimes right into it. Gets the nice fluffiness, I guess, and it seems to tolerate it better, and the plants like that. And then it allows for us to when we're bringing the tractor in, we've kind of got our lines marked, so we know where we got to be. And we do a lot of drip irrigation. So what we'll do is we'll just, in that bed, usually we'll run 4 rows, and we'll run a drip between 2 and 2, so that we can really control that moisture. Instead of soaking that center, we can kind of spread it out nice and evenly over that bed. And The carrots have always been my battle. I've fought carrots. I've tried so many different things with carrots, but the beets and that stuff seem to tolerate it really well. We do garlic too, and one of our favorites, garlic and the onions. We actually plant those into plastic. So we've got a special drum that we use behind our mulch layer that basically pokes holes every 4 inches, and then it offsets it every 2. So it patterns that whole plastic, and then we poke everything in there, and that, once the garlic starts, there's such a small hole in that plastic, and the onions too. The onions start poking through it just chokes the weeds right out, and we're able to control the moisture underneath there. And one of the fears I always had with that was the heat from that plastic would cook the onions and the garlic. And I don't know if it's just a function of where we're at, but we've never had any problem with that. And our garlic and onions have always been really, really good, really strong, and we're not fighting that weed pressure. So.
Yeah. Okay. So you're doing drip to germinate too on those those direct seeded roots? Are you using 12-inch emitters or 6 or?
I've gone to 6 actually.
Okay.
Especially there's like the 12s I'll use on my tomatoes and peppers, because I've got 2-foot spacing there. And I try, believe it or not, I try to really, if I can shuffle that drip tape underneath there to match my holes, it works really good. And then I'm not wasting so much underneath that plastic. But if I can get a heavier, that 6-inch emitter with a heavier soak, I have good luck with that. I tried one year. I tried it. I had one of those walking irrigators. I can't think of what it is, like a water wheel reel.
Yeah.
And I, even with the finest setting with that, it seemed like I couldn't quite control the water good enough to give them a chance. So our drip tape was with the way to go, and it's cheap. The cost of that drip tape is really affordable when you start talking about people walking around with the watering wands. And we did that too. When we first started, there was that was our after work. We'd get done with work 5-6 o'clock, and there was about 6 of us that would meet out there, my folks and some family friends and me and my wife, and we'd walk around dragging garden hoses with watering wands and anything that was, I'm going to say, a root crop, and the lettuces too, but the root crops especially, we nurtured them along that way. So as we started losing, I'm going to say, manpower, we've gone to that drip, and I like the way that profiles and the way that soaks the soil up. So have you had problems with it, or have you never tried that?
We've never really done drip for germ, because I always figured that the wet parts would be too far apart that you wouldn't get good even germination between. But I guess going to 6-inch, you get a pretty solid stripe of moisture.
Yep. There's
all the way down that drip.
It does, and you start to think you're going to get that concentration, but it does spread it nice. And you read on the soil profiles too how that percolates through there, and for us it works well. I don't know, in a sandier location you might have see those pockets, but it'd be worth a look this spring, or at least you try it on a row or two and see what you think. But that's the only way we've had a good germination, where we've got dry spells. The best medicine is a nice rain. That seems to always push them up. But if we've got to make it a synthetic rain, the drip is the way to go for us.
Wow, I'll definitely have to try that this spring then.
So now that it's obviously a few months or at least a few weeks from being able to get to your soil, what are you doing to plan for planting your root crops?
Yeah, we buy all our seeds about this time of year, mostly from supply issues. We find that if you wait till the last minute, inevitably the varieties you want are sold out. So we try and buy everything in a couple big chunks in January and February. That's in part also because as a CSA, that's when we have the cash flow to buy those things. And so we're not trying to stretch out our seed purchases. We can buy everything for the year in one chunk. As far as planning, we have gone to not really using maps at all. We'll plan out plantings, succession plantings based on when we need crops to be ready for the CSA to put in the box. And then we plan out how much we'll need to plant to, and we'll put in our maturity dates, our DTM. And then from there, you just kind of see how the soil is shaping up and see what looks dry or where we've got beds to turn over. We used to do a lot of mapping, and inevitably my plan would get all screwed up by July. And so all that effort mapping things out, it was just a waste of time. So yeah, we started moving to more of a kind of as needed. I know this week I've got to plant, 2 beds of beets and a bed of carrots and 3 beds of lettuce. And oh, look, these beds over here are done or whatever. And so I just turn them under and get them ready to plant again.
Yep. Yeah. It's the planning you try in my mind. I kind of map it out, but it seems like the weather just dictates so much where stuff goes. I try really hard not to be, back to back on things in the same places. But it just, you watching the weather, that you need this, or I start with the early stuff, and that, the beets are always one that goes in first. That's a good root. And actually the potatoes, we're planting, one of the first things we put in the ground is our potatoes. And, they may sit there a week or two, but then when the soil starts to really warm up, they take off and do their thing. But that's our garden too. We're kind of if you really look at it hard, we're in a kind of a bowl. There's we've got a slough right in the center of it. So we actually, when we start planting, we start working around the outside edge and working closer and closer to that. I'm going to say that slough or that water as the ground kind of dries up and things kind of, get back into shape, or summer shape, I should say. So, look at that. Our seeds, we try to actually order our seeds by January 1. The company we work with, E&R Seed, they do, they get a lot of promotions, the pricing is the best before January 1. So that's when we order everything, or try to, at least the bulk of it. There's always a few, hey, we should try this, or hey, we should try that. And, we'll throw a few packs in there later in the year. But now too, we're, I'm kind of starting to get the itch. So we're pulling the equipment in, looking that over, making sure everything's kind of ready to go, and anything that needs a tweak, or if we got to make another toolbar for the tractor or something that we want to try. I really want to try the finger weeder on some stuff this year, including the smaller root crops. And we did a rotary hoe last year. We built that during this time and got things, basically try to get everything ready. So when the weather does finally give us a chance, we can get it and hit it running. So I'd like to say there's a giant map on paper somewhere of the garden with everything in nice, neat rectangles that I can say, yes, the beets will be here, and the corn there, and the potatoes there. But it never seems to work out. And you probably relate, Dirk. You get out there and you're, everybody's kind of standing around you, ready to get working, and you're just kind of okay, yeah, that goes there, yep, over there, yep, that'll work. Just get it in the ground.
Yeah, definitely.
Just get it in the ground.
And so much of it is dependent on, for us, we're trying to do a decent amount of double cropping, right? And so, it really depends. Like if you get one cutting off a bed of arugula, or if you're trying to get 3 cuttings, so you're out there kind of looking at stuff and saying, well, I need to plant this next week, and this one's done anyways, I'm going to rip it up and put something else in that same spot. For us, we always try to reuse beds again, rather than move to a new spot. And then for our farm, we try and do a year on, year off rotation. So we'll work one section really hard, for the year. We'll try and double crop it, and then we'll put that into a full year cover crop the next year. And generally something that'll winter kill. So we'll put it in, maybe by June, we'll put it into a cover crop mix and then let it go all year, mow it a few times and knock it down. And that's also, to help with that weed seed bank as well, because that way you're getting a more long season smother on some of those weeds.
Yep. And there's pockets like our first, it seems like once we're done with something in a spot, we generally don't, unless it's a lettuce or something, I don't go back over the top of it. We'll always put a cover crop in. I really like doing the cover crop thing, and it seems the soil really seems to appreciate it. So why not? I don't know any other, what else you would want to do with it. Yeah.
I think that hearing that you don't have to overplan is reassuring for anyone listening who does like that same idea of just go out there and get a feel for it and make it work.
Planning a garden is a lot like daydreaming. It's a wonderful pastime while you can't do it, but it seems like the reality sets in really fast come spring.
When we started, everybody got really concerned about crop rotations, right? That was a big thing. Make sure you didn't follow plant families on other plant families for diseases and soil nutrition and all that. And it's important, but that's very much a secondary thing, right? And we had some mentors this last year, and because we're on a new piece of ground, and we were talking to them, and I was a little concerned about, how are we going to rotate this stuff? And they told us, they've been farming for 15 years, I think, and they said, the first couple of years, just plant where you need to plant, and then worry about your rotation once you kind of settled in. You're not going to build up. It's not like 2 years of beets in the same ground is going to cause disease issues necessarily. It's once you start to really repeat that year after year after year, and those first couple of years, until you get a feel for your ground and your operation, there's just so much other things to worry about that it's not really worth the mental space, right? Trying to think through this perfect crop rotation.
Yeah, there's so many things to balance. Like you really start dissecting it down, and I agree. The first year, everybody we were talking about potatoes and stuff, and the potato bug is a big one that they want you to rotate. Don't plant your potatoes on where your potatoes have been, and we planted our potatoes, and our ground was hasn't had potatoes on it probably ever, and potato bugs were there. They just showed up. So you want to be conscious of it, but I don't think making that the whole focus is a good use of time, because there's so many things that you need to balance. So timing and getting things in early is more important to me than making sure that the beets weren't here last year. So, but I do keep in the back of my mind, I try, but that's not my number one objective.
Mm-hmm. So going back to something that you can plan, when you're buying your seeds, do you guys typically buy the same thing every year? Do you do a lot of that experimentation, or what are you looking for in the varieties that you're buying?
Ours is we find the tested and true ones that do well in our soil, and we run with them. I try to keep the same list, and I work off of it. I got a great big Excel sheet that I put all my numbers in there and my cost of everything, and that's what I run with when I order, or how much did I use last year. So that's all in there for me to kind of track. So I like things that have worked, and part of that I kind of pulled from my grandpa's old database of stuff, and that works really well for us. I do dabble once in a while with a different variety. We've been we've kind of had some battles in the high tunnel with stuff, and I've changed varieties in there, but the beets and the potatoes and our crop, our root crops are I would say I don't think we've changed any of that since we started really gardening. The garlic, we produce our own garlic seed. That's the beauty of garlic. I'd say probably 10 to 20 pounds of our garlic that we produce, we hold back, and basically the stuff that isn't as pretty, that's what we plant in the fall for our crop in the spring. And that's, so we're not changing that variety either. And that variety, every year we replant it, gets more acclimated to our soils. And it seems like it does better and better every year. So that's how I approach it, or we've approached it. And it seems to work for what we're doing.
Yeah, for us, we'll do a little bit of experimenting with different varieties based on what it seems like the market is looking for. But a lot of times I find there to be a lot of distraction in doing fun or interesting varieties, especially on root crops. I think with some crops like tomatoes, maybe there are different varieties that people are interested in, but they make all these different colors of carrots, right? And people are interested, but people also just want orange carrots. So we try and stay mostly with a couple of, like Darin said, a couple of tried and true varieties. I know for storage carrots, Bolero is kind of the crown jewel of the vegetable world for doing storage carrots, especially in an organic system. And for beets, I don't know, I trust the seed catalogs. They're doing a lot of research and trials and on-farm stuff. And if they say, oh, we like this one better than one that I've used before, like I'll give it a shot. Sure. Because that's their job, right? Their job is to tell me as a grower what the best carrot or beet variety is going to be for the conditions that we're experiencing. Some stuff you switch from year to year. If you didn't, if you grow something and you say, I didn't really like how that turned out, then we'll just try a new variety. A lot of the like the brassica roots, like some of the specialty turnips and stuff, we're not growing enough that we're really depending on them for, maximum productivity. And so that, if we grew one scarlet variety last year and we didn't really like how it turned out, it was kind of woody, and we said, all right, try a new one, and we'll just jump to a different variety. But that's because scarlet turnips are not necessarily, the bulk of our root sales or the bulk of what people want. So something small like that, you can play around a little bit more with new varieties.
It's really reassuring or wonderful to hear that you hit that same wall. And like you said, it's cool to have, something different, like a different colored carrot, but for some reason it looks good on the stand and it looks interesting, but it doesn't seem like the people gravitate to it like you would expect them to. You're excited about it because you grew it, but the people that are putting their salad together, that's, that color of carrot isn't going to work for them. So it's the tried and true. It's always been, they've always outproduced or outsold, something different or something that I think would be kind of neat. So I 100% agree. Glad I'm not alone.
Yeah. There was a year when we did nearly all heirloom tomatoes, and I remember going to market, and everybody would stop and be so excited about all these neat tomatoes we had, and then they'd go to the guy next door to me and buy red tomatoes because that's what they wanted, And so we learned our lesson, and we started planting more red tomatoes. The heirlooms are pretty, but they're not necessarily what people want.
And why is that? I just, it's crazy to me. I mean, and even, you'll eat them like, well, that's the fun part of gardening. Like you're actually being the one producing it because you're out there trying it and tasting it versus everything out there. I've, the first when we first planted beets, the first one I grabbed was Bull's Blood beets just because it said Bull's Blood. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll try it. And I've tried different varieties, but I always go back to the Bull's Blood because it's a nice beet and people buy it. Same with our radishes. I did one, it was like a variety pack, and it had a bunch of different colors in it. And I'm like, oh, this is going to look cool. Nope. Everybody reached and grabbed the old school radishes. They didn't want all the different colored ones. And I think, I didn't even remember what it's called, but Yeah, it's just funny.
So you need just enough to get people to stop at your stand, but then have the old
Yep.
traditionals there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
The sugar snacks, that was one of my, I do like the sugar snacks carrot, but it doesn't seem like that one's a tougher one to grow for me. That's the one I
Mm-hmm.
like, but I can't ever get it to really, I probably get 70% germination out of it and it drives me up the wall. So, but that's one of my favorites, but that is Bolero, right?
Yeah.
No. Yep. Bolero. We've planted that one too, and that we've actually done pretty well with that one. So that one seems to want to grow.
So then what are you doing when you're planting your seeds? What does that look like? You kind of talked about it a little bit before, but do you have anything to add about how you plant your seeds for root crops?
You bet. I'll keep running. I we've done it probably three, four. I've tried 3 or 4 different things, and I've the first thing we did when we planted it, we actually started with pelleted seeds. A lot of our root crops, because like the carrots are a small seed. The the beets are kind of that goofy. I almost want to say fuzzy, but they've got a different. They don't look like a regular seed. So we could get our carrots a pelleted seed, and then we get our beet stuff because it's a little bit easier to meter. So I was using an old John Deere 71 planter with beet plates, and it worked. It worked okay. Did a decent job, and part of the gardening thing for me was trying to get some of this old equipment to work, but quickly discovered that wasn't as effective as it needed to be because we had problems with depth control. But then we tried we've actually got a Jang seeder, and we use that one quite a bit. That's been really good to us. Really good control of the depth. It meters things really nice, and it's a cost effective tool. Even if you were a serious hobbyist, you could almost talk yourself into a Jang seeder. And then lately, and Dirks, you're really going to love this. We took. I was so frustrated with my carrots. I took the paper pots. We actually started last year doing carrots and beets and starting them in paper pots and transplanting them. And we had some that did very, very well, and some of them that didn't do well at all. And the ones that didn't do well were the ones that we didn't quite have the soil perfect for it. And I think there's some other growers out there that have thought about doing the paper pot transplanter, and they'll say the same thing. That's common with that is you got to make sure your bed is right, otherwise you're going to have a problem, and make sure that machine is set. So those are kind of our 3. We've even done some hand seeding too, old school with a hoe. But the Jang seeder is probably my preferred method right now. And then in a close second would be that paper pot transplanter, especially if we're having late start. But I'll probably run 2 or 3. I'll try to do one 100-foot row of carrots, and by a row I mean a bed. So there's 4, so it'd be 400 feet of carrots with that paper pot transplanter, and then I use the tight cells, and it just being able to control that moisture sitting on the bench is so much nicer compared to trying to do it outside in the soil. And again, they tolerate that transplanting very well. So it's one thing I do to ensure I've got carrots midway through the year, and I'm not a total crop failure with it and the beets and all that stuff. So
Are you getting straight carrots with I've always heard with the paper pot and the carrots, some people had issues with the carrots kind of forking or branching because that taproot hits the bottom of the cell before you can get them out.
I didn't, and that was the ones that didn't do so good were we didn't have it prepped right. The beds weren't perfect. Where we had the beds perfect and we transplanted them early enough, they took off and they shot straight down, and really nice looking carrots. So
Mm-hmm.
you really, really got to dial in your timing with the paper pots if you're going to do a root crop. The radishes didn't care so much. The beets didn't care so much, but the carrots, if you were off in your bed or your timing, you got a little long and you start to see that root running on the bottom, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It wanted to kick them, and you had right angle carrots, which are wonderful in a soup, but you gotta,
right.
nobody wants them. Nobody wants them on the stand if they're not long and straight like Bugs Bunnies.
Mm-hmm. I would second the Jang 100%. We've used an Earthway. We actually switched once we got a Jang. We switched back to non-pelleted seeds because with those Jang rollers, you can get rollers that'll singulate. We found we were able to singulate well enough to do raw carrot seed, and I like to have the options, right? Because some of the varieties that I really wanted to try were not necessarily available in pelleted all the time, or the pellets would sell out.
Yep.
And so we switched to all raw seed. We also had some issues, not recently, but at the beginning we would have some issues on not being able to get enough moisture down to break the pellet open. Not being able to keep that pellet wet enough to let the seed emerge. So yeah, we do the Jang. Last year we started putting down a seed treatment with our seeds, not a chemical, but a biological stimulant for germination. And it's anecdotal, right? We're not scientists, so we didn't necessarily take measurements off of it. But anecdotally, it really helped us with our germination on spinach, beets, and carrots. All three of those, we had much better success getting a nice, straight, even germination off of them than we have historically. My wife and I have been so used to mediocre germination on beets that we just always overplant, assuming, 20 or 30% won't come up. And then last year, man, we just had all the beets come up, and then we had beets coming out our ears, which is not a bad problem to have.
No, but yeah, I'll produce it, right? That's the key. That's one of the games. If I need 100, let's plant 200 just to make sure.
Yeah. Well, and especially when you're not too tight on space, right? It's easy to say, we'll just till up an extra quarter acre and plant some more stuff.
Yeah, there's room right over there. We'll make a spot.
Yeah.
Then you get to market and you got 6 boxes of it, and oh man, nobody wants beets anymore? Come on, guys. Here, put them in the pot. You got to grill them. Have you ever tried grilled beets? Oh, that's a great way to eat beets. Oh, raw beets? Yeah, that's good too. We'll have Aunt May pickle some for you. That's even better. It's good to not be alone.
You can swap beet recipes too.
There you go.
What about potatoes? What do you guys doing to get your potatoes started and growing?
I'm pretty fortunate. We go up into North Dakota and we actually buy 1,000 pounds of seed potatoes, and we do 400 pounds of Yukon Golds, 400 pounds of reds, and then 200 pounds of russets. And actually I'm almost ready to give up on the russets. I like a russet, but people aren't too excited about it. But when we buy our seed, instead of buying like a 5-pound bag at a grocery store, we're actually getting a size B seed potato. So it's pretty simple for us. We've got a planter. My grandpa used it for years and years and years, and then I got parked in the trees. It was a 2-row, so he had a bigger tractor, but I've got a little bit smaller tractor, and so we ended up cutting this 2-row planter up, and this was part of the prep about 5 years ago. We cut this 2-row planter into a 1-row planter, and that's what we use to stick it in the ground. And what I do is I have the neighbor, he's got some heavier tillage equipment. He comes in and really cultivates it deep so we can start getting our hilling and stuff done. Or once we start planting, everything is nice and soft and easy to work in. And then we run the cultivators. We got mechanical cultivators, and then one thing we did last year is we ran the rotary hoe over the top of them to keep that first shot of weeds down, and that did a phenomenal job with it. And then cultivating them and about every once every week at least, it seemed like we stayed ahead of it. But for us, it's just right now waiting for the ground to cooperate, and we'll get our potatoes and get them in the ground and be on the way. So yeah, I actually got it pretty easy with my potato stuff, the crop. That's honestly one of the easier ones for me to do. That one I try to really pay attention, in the rotation. That and the sweet corn are the two that I like to rotate around. I don't like to plant potatoes where I had potatoes the year before. But that's an easy one because that's the first one of the first things that we plant. So,
are you digging your potatoes by hand, or you have a digger?
we've got a digger. We last year, you'll love this. There was an old horse-drawn digger that we used for the first probably 3 years, and we were digging, and it was fun until I ran it off the 3-point, to keep the height right,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked really well, except when the weeds would start to get wild.
Mm-hmm.
What I found is you go and if you're going to dig a row like that night, so our markets are on Tuesday, so Monday night, what I'd do is I'd come in with a rotary mower and I'd mow it, and then either Sunday night or Monday, and then we dig them Tuesday or Monday night. So kind of let that stuff dry down a little bit, and then it would go through that digger really, really easily. If I didn't do that, it would just ball up and we'd have a problem. But there was an old horse-drawn digger we used, and then 2 years ago we hooked a rock with it, and I broke it. I broke the chain on it, and I ended up ordering a Speedo potato digger, and that's been a phenomenal little tool. Does a wonderful job. We did last year, got to the fall, and we probably had half of our potato crop left out there, and we kind of threw a message up on Facebook and said, hey, if you're interested in potatoes, come on out. We're going to dig them on Saturday. And I jumped in the tractor, and we dug all the potatoes we had and picked them all up, and people came out, and they were, getting 50-pound boxes and away they go type deal. So it worked really, really well. And again, our stuff is really dialed in and mechanized, because the labor thing is so hard for us to find, people to help us. So anything I can do to mechanize something is money and time well spent. So.
Yeah, no, I hear all that you're saying about that. So our experience with potatoes, we've got kind of two different experiences. So we moved to South Dakota 2 years ago, and the farm we were on before that had a full lineup of small scale potato equipment. So we had, a tractor mounted planter. It was one that you sat on and had to put the slips or the chunks in the ground. And then we had, I think we had a side dresser, and then we had a 2-row digger, a Speedo digger. And yeah, same experience you had. If you could keep those rows clean, it was dreamy. And then as soon as you got grass or thistles in those rows, the greens would just ball up on the chain. You'd dig it and it'd be loose, and then you'd still have to sift through it all by hand to try and find the potatoes underneath. And so yeah, cultivation was always kind of a nightmare with that. I mean, potatoes are nice to cultivate because, like you said, they'll take such an aggressive you can hill them, you can run fingers over them, you can run, we ran those Lilliston weeders with the with the metal tines. We'd run those on them, and the potato plant will it'll look banged up. You'll finish cultivating, you'll think, oh, I just ruined it. I just destroyed that crop. And then, 3 days later, they're back up, the new leaves coming on and the weeds are all dead. So once we moved to South Dakota, we left all that equipment behind. So now we're doing it the old-fashioned way, walking up and down rows, putting potatoes in the ground, and then trying to hill them back up. We've got hilling discs on the tractor, so at least we're building our hills with a tractor. And then, coming through with a potato fork or a broad fork and digging them.
Oh man,
we're not doing that many potatoes right now. maybe, I don't know, last year, maybe we did 500 or 1,000 pounds,
Okay.
But even with those speedo diggers, like at the end of the day, you're still picking up all those potatoes one at a time, or three at a time by hand. I always had a dream, of actually getting one of those potato diggers that dig it and then dump it right into a bin, but we never quite
Yep.
got to the scale where we could justify one of those. So,
And I'm trying to think of a way to build one. How to?
Yeah. And variety wise, we, similar to you, we'll do reds and golds. We'll do some russets. We'll do some whites typically. And then we do a decent amount of fingerlings. We have found that that's a potato product that we can do at a competitive price point to what you find at the store. Potatoes are really hard to sell locally because, if you're digging by hand or digging with a little side discharge digger, you just can't beat the price that they can do them for with a big machine, because of the cost of labor and the economies of scale. So for us, like fingerling potatoes and new potatoes are two products that we really find that the extra labor we can get paid back for because people are willing to pay more. So we can get pretty easily $3 a pound on fingerling potatoes, because that's a pretty similar price to what they'll have in the store. Whereas, to try and sell your normal potatoes at $2 or $3 a pound, a lot of people kind of blanch at that and say, "Well, a red potato's a red potato. What makes yours so special?" So, yeah, we've leaned more into specialty varieties, leaned away from russets, leaned away from Yukon Gold. The reds are still a nice potato to have. People like red potatoes, and for a CSA box, it's nice to have the reds. More so probably than the bigger ones because the reds are easier to put into dishes for people, So, yeah. So hopefully someday I'll move back to the world of tractor planters and tractor harvesters for potatoes. But right now, just doing it the old-fashioned way.
Oh, you've got, but you hit the nail on the head. I can produce it with the tractor and stuff. Excuse me. Where I can get to, where I'm looking at $1 a pound is usually like our reds and Yukon Golds, and we can crank out enough where that makes sense for us to do it, and it doesn't take us long, and we'll take 400 pounds of potatoes to the market every time. So, and usually they're gone. So that, but the fingerlings, that I've never thought about doing that. The other one I get asked for a lot are the sweet potatoes, but I can't imagine the manpower for a sweet potato. It's just something I haven't got the courage yet to try. So
I think you can run sweet potatoes through one of those diggers. I've seen guys do it. I have not done it myself.
And I think you can too. But the problem I had is actually getting them to start growing. I have tried a few times getting them to grow, and I've fought and fought and fought, and I've listened to the good old boys, and they give me their ideas on it, and I haven't seemed to found the right formula yet.
Are you doing them on plastic or bare ground?
Those are all bare ground. I haven't dabbled with anything potato wise in that stuff. So.
Well, because I'm not sure we get enough heat units to do sweet potatoes on bare ground. I would be surprised, at least. I know where we were in Wisconsin, which is a zone warmer than here. Any sweet potato production anyone was doing was on plastic, just to get all the solar units they could get into the potatoes.
I never even thought of that. And actually, you being down where you're at versus even where I'm at, I'm behind you in heat units too.
Right.
So I would probably be part of the problem. So maybe the plastic, we've gone to a solar, or not solar, but a photodegradable plastic. That might be worth looking at there. But I can about imagine what that would look like balled up inside the potato digger.
Oh yeah.
Oh, shoot. I bet we'd be digging that out for days.
Yeah.
But where you can get a premium on a local sweet potato, that might be worth looking at least. I know my clientele and everybody that comes and sees me, they love the local potatoes, and they know the difference. They will come to me and they will say every time that, hey, there is nothing better than a potato dug out of the ground today. And when we eat them too, there's you pull a red out of the ground the same day and eat it, it tastes different than the one that was done in the store. And I'm fortunate to have people that recognize that. So, there for a while too, the market prices were so high on potatoes. I had a few little ladies come up and tell me that I was too cheap with my potatoes. So I said, well, just enjoy it and get your fill. Buy extra then, is what I told them, I think. So,
yeah.
but no, all good. I like the sweet potato idea. I will look into that, actually.
We're going to try that this year. We're going to buy in slips and put them on plastic. We've always kind of avoided it before. And yeah, it's just, we really like to do a fall storage share, and having sweet potatoes for that. It's just, that's really something people like to have. They like to have plenty of, and it's just a fall, really in people's minds, it's a fall crop, Yep. And so if you can say, oh yeah, we've got sweet potatoes available, then people really go for that.
I think there's kind of there's a group of people that are there. Not I'm saying a group of people, but there's a new thing, and there are more and more people I'm finding that are stocking up on the potatoes. They're stocking up on the onions, those things, and they're actually putting them in their basements and eating on them till January, February, where normally that wasn't the case. It seems like there's more and more of that are starting to, that trend is starting to happen again, which is it's good. So.
Throughout the growing season, what pests and growth problems do you come across, and what are you doing to address that?
For me, I'm going to say,
go ahead.
In my root crops, there's always, probably the biggest one that I fight with is the potato bugs. That's probably my meanest one. And my cousins tell me that when Grandpa was fighting with them, he'd actually walk every row, look at every single plant to find them, and he'd take the plant and he'd pull the leaves off. He'd basically take that whole plant and go over to the burn barrel and throw it in the burn barrel. Just because there's not a lot you can do with a potato bug. The pesticides and stuff are pretty harsh for them. So you just kind of try and avoid it. So, or try and catch it early is about all you can do. So, that's the big one for me is the potato bugs. And, that's the one I always watch out for.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. The potato beetles are they're heartbreaking, especially, the first couple of years we were farming and didn't necessarily have a great handle, on some of our systems or what to watch out for. I still remember one year, we had a big field of potatoes we'd put in, and we'd had quite a bit of lamb's quarter come up in it. And, I was out there one day checking out how the plants were growing. We were going to start digging for new potatoes pretty soon. And I got out there and realized that what I had thought was a beautiful field of potatoes was actually a beautiful field of lamb's quarter. And the beetles had just, shredded the potato plants down to the ground. So,
and they do.
Yeah, they do. And they'll just still decimate it.
I left for 2 days and I got the phone call. Mom called me and she said the potato bugs are bad in the potatoes. And I'm like, oh shoot. Well, I was tied up. I couldn't get back. And by the, in 2 days time, there was nothing left.
Yeah. Yeah. And ever since then, ever since that experience, anytime, we see the potato beetles, normally we're fairly conservative when it comes to spraying things to kill pests. And we do follow organic systems, but even with organic stuff, we're pretty I'd rather take a little bit of crop loss, but with potato beetles, we don't mess around anymore. So we have started a regimen of it's like a bacteria, I think. It's an organic certified, it's an OMRI listed insecticide, Bovarea basania, I think, and you can spray it on. You basically just spray it on every 2 weeks, and it colonizes the leaves of the potato plants, and then when the beetles go to eat it, I'm not sure exactly the method it uses, but it kills them real quick. By ingesting that, I think that colonizes them from the inside. And so we've started to apply that when we first see the potato beetles cropping up in the crop, because like most organic insecticides, it's more preventative than it is reactive, right? Like it'll help to keep them from spreading, but it's not the same as a commercial insecticide, where it just knocks them down in one shot. So we've started doing that. Every once in a while, we'll use like a pyrethrum on them, Pyganic, which is a big knockdown, insecticide. But again, I'm always hesitant to use a broad spectrum insecticide because, for every bad bug you're killing something else. And then eventually you throw your whole system, your natural system out of whack. And then, generally the pests are more aggressive than the good ones. So if you kill off all of it, then the bad ones come back quicker.
Yep.
Besides potato beetles, I agree with Darin. There's not much else to worry about for our root crops.
I've tried the pyrethrin has worked really, really well, but there's a lot of commercial pesticides that were misapplied, and that's they had a lot of problem with building up resistance with those potato beetles, and that's the pyrethrin. That's been good for me, and like I said, you get started early on it. The ounce of prevention is worth so much more as a cure than waiting till it's a problem. If I don't like to do anything unnecessarily, but if a guy can keep ahead of it, it seems to just make things a lot better. So.
Mm-hmm. So assuming that you have a good amount of crop at the end, you've got past the pests and the growth, what are you doing for harvesting and cleaning your product for the market?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to say a lot of my root stuff, I don't wash a lot of it. Some of it we do. We've got a vegetable washer that we use. The potatoes for sure I don't wash. I just leave them. They seem to keep better if they're not washed, and that's what I've done. Everything we do is pretty much by the pound. So our we knock the the dirt off, and if we have to, rinse the mud off a little bit. But if we can get by without doing it, I feel like the product lasts longer, especially if the people aren't going to eat it right away. So that's kind of been our thought process. And it's working. I haven't had any complaints yet. So there's people out there that said dirt's good for you. I don't know. Some days I wonder, but that's the motto we've run with so far.
Yeah, real similar for us. I think if we do anything bunching, fresh bunches with the tops on in the summer, we might, if too much dirt comes up with the crop when we're pulling it out of the field, maybe we'll give it a quick rinse with a hose and let them dry off. For us, part of that is to get a little extra water on the crop, especially with the greens. We're putting everything in boxes in the summertime, and so a little bit of extra water on the roots and on the greens keeps those greens from wilting too quickly while they're waiting for people to come pick them up. But then for storage, we're storing. So when we dig our storage roots in the fall, we'll store them all dirty. Just like Darin said, they seem to store way better. And then we'll bring them out. When we're sending them in the wintertime, we try and wash them up just because it makes them present a little bit better. And sometimes, beets without tops, you want to make them nice and shiny so that people are like, oh, that's a nice looking beet. So they're not going to be distracted by the greens.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll run this through a brush washer primarily. I know people have used those barrel washers on roots, and I've just never liked them that much. They always seem like a lot of effort. but
And our barrel washers have been good to us. I mean, we got that. It's been good. So I've never been exposed to anything other than the barrel washer. So my knowledge is pretty limited, but that's like, I'm going to say our cucumbers, like when we wash cucumbers and stuff for picklers, that's one that goes in there. And then the beets too, and the carrots, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's if we can get by without washing it, it's a good thing. It saves on our labor. We could drive the price up by having to wash it, or you could take it home and rinse it off in your sink and be probably both money ahead and then have a fresher product when you're done too. So, well, that presentation is important. And I mean, a guy can't get, you don't want to be sloppy with it, but I try and find that delicate balance is what we kind of shoot for.
Well, and that really depends on your client base, and I mean, again, we farmed in some different places. I know when we were selling produce into Chicago, there was a very different level of cleanliness expected out of the produce, right? I mean, we actually got a couple of complaint emails about how dirty our potatoes were the first year we were doing it. So then that's when we started, washing everything, because that's, I mean, very much based on feedback, right? Like if people say, hey, we want this cleaner, then it's your job as a grower to clean it up. But until then, I agree. If they're not asking for it, if it's not adding value to the customer, then you're just wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
Great thoughts. Do you guys have any other overall thoughts or ideas that you want to make sure to mention today for root crop growing and selling?
Nothing. Not really. I guess I don't really have anything extra. Everybody's going to do it different. Listening to Dirk talk about it, my methodology is a little different, and the things that I'm doing that are successful might not be successful for somebody else. It's something you got to just, like everything, you got to get in and try it. And some years the plan is great. But the next year you might have a completely different spring and be fighting a completely different set of problems. So, best advice is the seed is the cheapest thing you can buy, and buy plenty of it, put it in the ground, and see if you can make it grow.
Great.
Oh man, you stole my line. Seed is cheap. That's what I always say.
That's my grandpa said that one, so I stole it from him first.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the one thing I'd want people to know is it seems like a lot of young farmers starting out are kind of scared of root crops, particularly storing root crops, potatoes or storage beets or storage carrots. And I understand, but also that seems to really be a segment of the market that's just no one's really accessing. A lot of young growers are doing the greens, the high dollar salad mixes, the specialty greens, the microgreens, and it's flashy, but there's a lot of money to be made in roots. And it's not as exciting, right? It's not as exciting to just sell people carrots at 80 cents a pound or whatever. But, if you can sell them 10,000 pounds of carrots, you're still making good money on that. And I think a lot of young growers ignore roots, probably, to their own detriment, because it's one of the easiest crops to get in front of people because it stores better than greens. It's very simple to, you can harvest a couple 100 pounds of something and keep it in a cooler and sell it as people want it, as opposed to lettuce, which you have a really short turnaround time on, and I don't know. I like growing roots, so I think everybody should grow more roots.
Yeah, he agreed. It's there's definitely a flashiness to the salads, but at the end of the day, there's you're gonna, the potatoes, the beets, rutabagas, the garlic, the onions, those are things that you can produce, I'm going to say tonnage of, and do it pretty efficiently if you really kind of want to. And I don't know, I see the greens, and greens look really, really labor intensive to me, and the roots just I don't see that in the roots. So I agree, run with the roots. That's kind of been some of our bread and butter crop. And it's too bad if people are skimming over it, because I think at the end of the day, I do enjoy a salad. But the right next to my steak is my baked potato. So where my heart lies.
You both had some great closing thoughts. Thanks. Yeah. I think you make a good, inspiring message for becoming a root crop farmer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we didn't even rehearse that. That's the best part.
Yeah, I know.
Well, thank you both for coming on today and sharing your thoughts and experience and letting people learn from what you've gone through. If a listener wanted to see photos of your farm or get in touch, do you both have social media or websites?
Yeah, we do. We're on, we've got a website, blueskyveg.com, VEG, and then on Instagram, also at Blue Sky Veg.
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Waldner Farms on Facebook, and then Instagram. And my wife runs all that stuff, so I'm not as up with it as I am, but she does a really good job of keeping everything up to date and kind of what we got ready and available. And that's the best way to get a hold of us. So
great. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully you've inspired some other South Dakota growers, and maybe we'll see a few more doing root crops this summer. And thanks also for our listeners for tuning in to the South Dakota Specialty Producers Association podcast. Until next time, keep growing.